Time for our second episode of the day, and lucky for us, it's a Mailbag Friday. Coming up on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Jack Johnson, and be sure to give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can download our podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're also on Odyssey. And check us out on YouTube. Just be our next subscriber to get us to our goal of 1,000 by opening day 2024. So still about 2 months away, but we're about 75 or so subscribers from that 1,000 mark, which we're very excited about here on the Locked On channel. You can always shoot me over questions on that YouTube page, or you can reach out to me on Twitter. I'll try my best to get to everybody's questions, especially on days like this when we have a Mailbag Friday. And even though this week's been kind of unique, it's been a little bit different. We had 2 episodes today. It's the second one we're bringing you. And it's only been 3 episodes a week for about the last month and a half. We're going to be jumping back to 5 episodes a week coming up on Monday, and we're going to have that for 10 months straight. We're going to have 5 episodes a week. There might be some off weeks due to vacation, whether I'm sick or not, but we're still going to try to maintain a pretty consistent output of podcast episodes weekly because start of the season is right around the corner. We are so close to the beginning of spring training. I believe pitchers and catchers report next Friday. We're going to be down there in Surprise, Arizona for a few days right before their full squad workout. We're going to be there on that Saturday through Wednesday. Monday's their first full squad workout coming up on February 19th. We'll be down there 2 days before that, bringing you interviews, bringing you live tweets, bringing you podcast episodes. It's going to be such a great time down there. Can't wait to get down there, not just because of the weather, but because we get to see some live game action right there in person. And we're going to be a little bit more consistent with, bringing up the now. We're not going to be doing many podcast episodes or segments on the 2023 season anymore, what this player could do. And we can't wait to start talking about stuff that's actually happening, right? Guys performing in spring training, how guys are looking, some certain moves that may happen. Can't wait. Going to be a fun time. And I know this episode's a little bit later on in the day. Wanted to get this out before 10 o'clock. It's been very busy all week long. It's been busy today. Absolutely in so much pain. My back is killing me from doing the yard work I talked about in the first podcast episode today. I still got a lot more to do tomorrow. So we are definitely going to rest up before Monday. Not going to have any hangups. So we're going to get these podcasts out in a timely manner. But don't want to waste any more time there. I know I've been rambling on here. It's a Mailbag Friday. Want to get to every single question that was sent over to me either through Twitter or on YouTube. And I'm glad that I screenshotted this one follower's question that he sent me all the way back on January 29th because I had actually lost it on my Twitter page. So I want to make sure I answer this question. This comes from Grand the Tatum. I believe that's how you pronounce the username there. His question is, what are the top 3 favorite future bets on FanDuel for the Royals this upcoming season? FanDuel, of course, today, a very proud sponsor. We love having FanDuel as some of our main title sponsors for our podcast episodes. And looking ahead to the future, man, some future bets that would be great based off the odds. I'd have to go back and refresh because they're always moving up and down a little bit. I think Bobby Witt Jr. leading the league in stolen bases is a pretty good one there because I'm not just going to give you ones where you're going to lose money on it. But I also want to take some chances. I think some fun ones that I really like. Honestly, if Cole Reagans is healthy, I would throw down some money on him leading the league in strikeouts. But that's also a big if. That's more of a throw $5 down on it just for the heck of it. Bobby Witt Jr., MVP odds would be pretty interesting. Another one that might make sense is maybe Salvador Perez leading the American League in home runs. Those are ones that have kind of happened before. I think Salvi tied Vladdy Jr. that year. He had 48, but those are some that I kind of like here. The top three, probably Bobby Witt Jr. leading the league in stolen bases. Let's go for a fun one throw. Not a lot of money down on it. Cole Reagan's leading the league in strikeouts. That's just a fun bet. If you get it right, you're going to be very, very wealthy with that bet. And then maybe, I'll go with the Salvi one. I'll go with Salvador Perez leading the American League in home runs. I think those three future bets I really like there. Now to the next question I got from Chase. If you had to choose an MVP from the Royals in 2014, that World Series, who would it be? He says, call me crazy for saying it's Omar, who hit 318, had an OBP of 333, a slug of 591. With a home run, had the most RBIs and the only hit against Bumgarner in Game 7 until Gordon's triple. Funny you say that. I was just having a beer with one of my friends it was this past Monday, and we talked about that Game 7. Somehow came up in conversation, but I did say, Omar opened up that outing by Bumgarner with a rope, a frozen rope of a single to center field, and I thought at that moment things were going to trend in the right direction. It did not. I don't need to tell anybody listening here that they did not. If I had to pick one, though, without having the stats in front of me, I think I would either go with... I know Wade Davis actually didn't fare that well in the World Series. He got roughed up in one of those games in San Francisco. Maybe Holly or Herrera. If I was going to go with a bullpen guy, Ventura would have to be up there for me because Ventura had, that's my vote there. I'm going to go with Yordan Ventura. Game 2 and Game 6 were lights out at Kauffman Stadium. He would have been my MVP if the Royals were to win it. Again, they did not, so don't need to open up those old wounds there. But great question there coming from Chase. Danny asks, Asa Lacy throwing pens down in Arizona and pull downs over 100 miles an hour. If he's truly healthy, how fast do you think he can move up in the system? We had a podcast about Asa Lacy a couple months back, and I brought up the idea of if he's healthy, which right now it appears he is. That's a great sign for the Royals. I thought it'd be smart to throw him back there in Double-A. I don't think you need to start him back in High A and Quad Cities and make him prove himself there. I think the mental part of it is, hey, let's go see if it works in Double-A. Now, if he's not healthy, build him back up. But I'd put him back in Double-A if he's healthy and he's got stuff like that. Just see if he can tread water a little bit. I mean, he's coming up now in his, age 24, 25 season. He's not that young anymore. You got to see if he's got it, and you got to see it in a hurry because I feel like the Royals need to find out themselves if there is anything worth hanging on to there. This is a first-round pick we're talking about, and a guy that felt like a safe pick at the time. But if he's healthy, I'd put him in Double-A. If he succeeds, there's no reason he couldn't be banging on the door of Kansas City by the end of the year. But that would, of course, take another worldly type of year for Asa Lacy, which he hasn't pitched barely in a year and a half. So not holding my breath on that. Good question, though, from Danny. Casey Royals asked on Twitter, Casey Royals Fanatic, I should say, Trevor Bauer, why not? Overpay a bit, set him on an old redemption trail, and at the very worst, restock the cupboards of a Bear Farm system at the deadline. We've gotten a lot of Trevor Bauer questions. I'm just going to keep giving you guys the same answer, and that is nobody's really talking to Trevor Bauer. I don't think he's going to pitch in the big leagues this year. It would really shock me if a deal gets done, and at the end of the day, I think the Royals rotation is pretty much set. I'm sorry, but Jordan Lyles is going to be in that rotation when they go to Surprise, and he's getting some work in. He may lose that spot, but if he were to lose it, it's going to Daniel Lynch or it's going to Alec Marsh or Anthony Veneziano or Jonathan Bowen, one of those guys. But I'd imagine with what they're paying him, how spring training goes, he's not going to lose his spot unless he just has no sign of being able to anchor down the last spot in the rotation. So unfortunately, for those that do want Trevor Bauer, I don't think Trevor Bauer is really in the cards, not just for the Royals, but for anybody in Major League Baseball right now. Next question comes from Bear and Rob Rice on Twitter. He asked a few years ago, the Royals picked up a starting pitcher named Wade Davis and then moved him to the pen where he thrived as their closer. In their search for a closer, is there 2 or 3 guys out there available that the Royals could target that could possibly close games? Yeah, I think they're still maybe testing the waters for a closer. I'm sure your question there is, will they go after a starter they could transform into a closer? Well, Wade Davis was a little bit of a reliever too in Tampa Bay, so he had experience coming out of the bullpen. That I would need to do a little bit more digging on. However, the closer they get to Surprise, the less of a chance I think adding another major league guy to their 26-man roster is going to happen. I just don't think the Royals like acquiring guys middle of spring training and then having them get accustomed to the team and everybody, the coaching staff, before the regular season. Like, if that move was going to happen, it felt like it was going to happen before surprise. Now, there's still another week and a half. Something could happen. I've given the targets that I think are possible, but it's still more of a wait and see at this point. This roster feels all but finalized after the move for Adam Frazier. We'll see, though. I'll keep the options open. All right, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, still plenty of more questions to get into. I don't want to waste any time on it. That's next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. And catch us on wherever you get your podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and we are on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. Before we go any further, let's give a shout out to the title sponsor today in FanDuel. And a happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring, the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. I'll be honest with you, I've already put down some money on a few prop bets, which FanDuel thrives in. We were just asked on Mailbag Friday some future bets for the Royals. I mean, you don't even have to bet on the Super Bowl. Start betting on Major League Baseball because FanDuel has everything accessible to you if you like college basketball. The NCAA tournament's right around the corner, about another month and a half before that happens. Start getting familiar. Start finding your niche of where you like to put money down on. Don't just throw your money away. Find out what you're good at, the smart bets, and maybe some parlays in the Parlay Hub because FanDuel specializes in stuff like that. They've got so many ways to not just end your season with a W, sometimes 2, 3, or even more than that. Now, with Super Bowl 58, FanDuel's got bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, the over-under there, and so much more. So new customers, join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. More questions I want to get into the Mailbag Friday. Again, not going to waste any time on these. Marty asks, when a player gets traded for cash considerations, is there a minimum or maximum amount of money that can be traded? That is a fantastic question. And usually on a Mailbag Friday, I'll try to, even though I don't know the answer, I'll try to work through it a little bit. Because right now, as I'm doing this podcast, I don't, like to really search it on Google while I'm doing this because it feels like I'm stalling. You can hear the ticking of the keyboard, if you will. I feel like it's kind of distracting. So off the top of my head, I'll be completely honest with you. I don't know if there's a limit. It's not a large sum because, right, when you think about cash considerations, you're trading a guy that's not very expensive. So it might be something of, you're acquiring money because you have to pay that player a certain amount. We've seen all the time in baseball with big contracts. When you send a guy somewhere, you can send money with them. You're paying part of that contract. I kind of put that hand in hand with cash considerations. So off the top of my head, because it's never really specified, it's never really public, I don't think there's a true limit. I think there's usually a ballpark of how much money is sent with the player that's not making a lot, probably has something to do with their salary. I'll be honest, though, I don't have the actual numbers in front of me. My guess is, though, and if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me on the YouTube channel or on Twitter. If I'm wrong and somebody finds it out, they're looking on Google right now as you're listening to this podcast, let us know the exact answer. But my guess is right now, there's not really a hard definitive answer because I feel like that'd be publicized every time you got cash back for a player. Next question comes from Xander. With the Brewers trading Corbin Burns, what could a Devin Williams trade look like for the Royals? I do want to get out there and say this. Devin Williams to the Royals is not happening. Okay, I can say that with full confidence. He is not coming to Kansas City. A, that is the best closer in baseball. B, he's under club control. So he's not making a lot of money for the Brewers. There's no need to go and shop him. I know they are. They are looking for multiple top 100s. They are looking for guys that can replenish a farm system. And also this, Devin Williams is going to be good in the first half. You can dangle him in the offseason, right? You can dangle him as bait. And then he's probably going to thrive in the first half. You hope he stays healthy. At the deadline, teams get more desperate. That's the perfect time to trade for Devin Williams. He likely was never an option for the Royals because of the asking price. They don't have anybody, even in their farm system, even their number one in Blake Mitchell. That's not enough. They could have traded 4 or 5 guys from their farm system. It wouldn't have been enough for Devin Williams. They're going to be looking for top 100 guys. And the reason his asking price is uber high, not just because he's the best closer in baseball. It's because he's not making anything right now. He's under club control for another 2 years. Now, the Brewers have a steal with Devin Williams. He's not coming to Kansas City. I can't even propose a trade because they don't really have much to offer. And they're, of course, not trading anybody like Michael Garcia, Bobby Witt Jr., Vinny Pasquantino. In fact, I didn't even think Vinny or Michael Garcia would be enough to get Devin Williams. That probably wouldn't be what the Brewers wanted. If they're going to trade him, they want top 100. They want to replenish that farm system, not have major league ready guys at the moment. Next question comes from JT Royals. Do the Royals still make that closer move? If I'm going to put a percentage on it, I would put it at 20%, maybe a little bit less than that now. I'm sure that JJ Picollo is still calling around. There's just not a great collection of closers to pick from. We had that podcast episode last week about it. Kyle Finnegan and Hunter Harvey, they're cheap, but also under club control. Maybe their asking price is too high. Kenley Jansen makes a little bit of sense, but he's making $16 million. And it was reported at the beginning of this week that they're looking for a mid-level prospect. If you'll take on all of his contract, the Royals don't want to pay $16 million of Kenley Jansen's contract, even if it only costs them a prospect in their system. That just is not really smart business when you have a couple of guys that can close out games for next to nothing. I mean, Will Smith has closing experience. You're paying him next to nothing in 2024. So I'm going to put it still pretty low. There's just not really a big pool of closers out there to go trade for. I don't see it happening. I think the Royals would rather develop a closer at this point if Will Smith isn't the one closing out games for them. Next question comes from Tom. Tom asks, Royals only had 2 guys over 2 WAR last season. Cleveland had 7 and Minnesota had 9. How many do you think KC has to have this year to compete for the division? And who do you think they'll be? Good question there. I'd put it right at 7. I think 7 guys with over a 2 WAR makes a lot of sense for the Royals. You kind of match Cleveland, be in the hunt a little bit. Anywhere 7, 8, 9. I think that's kind of a good mark to shoot for. Bobby Witt Jr. is going to easily get that. I'd imagine Michael Garcia is going to get that with his defense. I'd imagine Kyle Isbell with his defense can get above a 2 WAR. Vinny Pasquantino with his bat, I'll put that as the 4th option. Reagans, Lugo, and Waka could be 7 right there. And Salvi, there's 8. I would probably say 8 right there would be what you want to shoot for. I think a lot more guys are going to have opportunities throughout the course of the season because of their defense, and for some guys just because of their bat to surpass that 2 WAR threshold. So good question there coming from Tom, I believe it was. RB Carr asked on Twitter, Frazier seems to have completed the wish list except for JJ. Recent indication that he's looking for another reliever / closer. Given he has got everything else done, he said this winter, do you anticipate another pitching acquisition of any significance? Yeah, that kind of goes hand in hand with the closer. 15 to 20%, I would say on that. They might bring in a couple of minor league deal guys. That always happens before spring training. So yes, more arms will probably join them and surprise Arizona. But in terms of a big acquisition, I'm starting to lose hope that it's actually going to happen. Colton asked on Twitter, I love being optimistic about the Royals, but all the spending they've done feels way too convenient to me. Do you think there's a possibility that they are just putting up a front to get votes for a stadium and sell big at the deadline, or does this feel real to you? This feels real to me. I think the Royals are trying to compete. They're not doing this just to get the support of the fans. JJ Picollo was a guy that wants to win and win desperately here. I think with the budget that he was given, this was the way to go about it. It's not about getting votes for a stadium, but also you can make a case for that they're going to get votes for the stadium. They're going to get support from the fan base if they win games. This is a way to do it. If they completely bottom out and they have to sell at the deadline, I'd imagine they'll sell off a couple of guys that they acquired this offseason, but they're not going to go fire sale and trade away Bobby Witt Jr. and Vinny and Garcia. They're not doing that. They're done doing the rebuild phase. If this doesn't work out this year, they're going to go back to the drawing board and try to assemble a different type of team. That to me is what I'm getting from JJ Picollo and the new voices in the front office. Jeff asked what you think the lineup will be. I tweeted this out not too long ago. I would go with Michael Garcia leading off at third. Vinny or Bobby Witt Jr. the 2-hole. I'll go with Vinny at first base, then Bobby Witt Jr. third. Salvador Perez cleaning up and doing the catching. Fifth, I'd put MJ Melendez there. I like the righty-lefty stuff. Hunter Renfroe sixth there, playing right field. Seventh, I got Massey playing second. Batting eighth, Velasquez. He's going to be DHing. And then ninth, I got Isbell as the last left-handed batter in the lineup. So that's my 1 through 9 right there. As the opening day starter being Michael Walker. I'll go with that. And lastly, Riccardi asked, who would you have rather signed that Royals could have gotten for same amount or less than Frazier's contract? Mine would have been Domingo Germán. Major improvement from Jordan Lyles. Frazier, not much of an improvement at all. I'm just not that high on Domingo Germán. I know he had the perfect game. It was also against Oakland last year. Also a lot of off-field issues. The domestic violence situation. Also, he got sent home, I believe, last year because of alcohol abuse for the New York Yankees. So off-field issues, that might not be worth it to me. Jordan Lyles is going to be the 5 start. If he's not good again, they're going to be able to pivot to somebody else. I just don't think they need to go bring in somebody else who really doesn't move the needle. I'd rather see the Royals go with some homegrown guys as the number 5 spot if Jordan Lyles isn't the one. If I was to spend the money not on Frazier, I would use that money to go get Ryan Stanek for the bullpen. I think there's one last piece they need for that bullpen to really stabilize it. I can't believe Ryan Stanek is still available out there. So he'd be somebody, maybe Phil Maton, but I think Phil Maton's a little bit more than $2.5 million, but it would not be Domingo Germán for me. All right, that wraps up another edition of a Mailbag Friday. Thank you all to the questions that we got on Twitter, and you can always shoot them over to me on the YouTube channel as well. I'll try my best to get to every single one of them. Before we move on to our final segment, one last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. When we return, I'm going to ask the question, what should the Royals do with Drew Waters this spring? That's next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Jack Johnson. Give me a follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. Also, go follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Locked_on_Royals. We're going to be trying to post a little bit more as we get closer to the start of the regular season. Just trying to juggle a lot of different accounts, trying to make sure I get out the best possible podcast episodes, handling the social media aspect. It can be a little bit daunting at times, so bear with me. Keep following on all those platforms, and that way, by the time the regular season rolls around, we're pretty well versed in all of those platforms. But again, you can always reach out to me for not just questions on the Royals, but if there's something you want us to change a little bit with the podcast. I love incorporating the listeners, the followers. I do this for the fans. I don't do this for myself. I enjoy getting feedback. I enjoy hearing from you guys. That's why I love doing Mailbag Fridays. They're my favorite episode of the entire week. And when we do these Mailbag Fridays, we always have room for one more segment. That last segment of the week kind of ties it all together. And the one we're going to roll with today is Drew Waters. What should the Royals do with Drew Waters? And the reason I brought this up is because I've been getting some followers, responding to some of my tweets, responding to some of my podcasts saying, Kyle Isbell can't start. He's a 4th outfielder. I'd rather have Drew Waters out there starting in center field. The good thing for the Royals is that I don't think you can go wrong with either of them. Kyle Isbell was better than Drew Waters last year. Let me put it that way. Not offensively, but as a player, as a valued member of the lineup, he was better. The defense was that good from Kyle Isbell. And if you've watched Royals baseball long enough, you would know that defense in center field is a big part of their lineup. If you can play a good center field, they're not asking you to be a top 3 hitter on the team, a.k.a. Michael Taylor. The Royals lucked out in 13, 14, and 15 that Lorenzo Cain was so damn good. I believe he was the best player on those postseason teams because of his defense, because of who he was as an offensive player. Now they're in this era of they got really good defensive center fielders. They don't have the best offensive players. And that's why I'm more so on the board of Kyle Isbell. Because I also think Kyle Isbell has a better chance of being a average center fielder than Drew Waters does. Because there's a huge glaring part of Drew Waters' game that I don't know gets fixed. In the same way, I don't know if it gets fixed with Nick Prado. There's been fans that say, "Oh, well, Nick Prado can play first base. His defense is better than Vinny's. Let's DH Vinny, and then we'll put Prado at first base." There are things I like about Drew Waters. There are things I like about Nick Prado. But the glaring part of their game is they strike out too much. There's a lot of swing and miss. Prado, and Waters for that matter, don't have enough power, don't get on base enough to have that big of a swing and miss. Kyle Isbell, he strikes out. He doesn't walk that much. Both these guys don't walk that much. But right now you have two center fielders that are just really good defensively. Isbell's better than Waters defensively. The bats, to me, when I look at them, they're interchangeable. Yeah, I think Drew Waters has more of the wow potential. I mean, he had a 480-foot home run last year in the fountains at Kauffman Stadium. Like, there's real-time potential there. There's big-time potential, big-time pop in the bat. However, I go back over and over again. I'm a broken record. This is going to sound annoying to a lot of people. I go back to what J.J. Picollo said at his season end review press conference. Not really the phrase you think I'm going to go for of, we have guys that can bounce back and we can't count on that anymore. That's one part of it. The thing that I want to highlight here is that J.J. was going down the line saying what they were evaluating in 2023 and what they feel like they got answered. They wanted to evaluate Bobby Witt Jr. And he said, we feel like we evaluate him. We know that he's now a superstar. He said they evaluating the rotation, knowing where they were at with it. Evaluating Maikel Garcia. They felt like they, hit on that successfully. And one of the other things he said is, we wanted to know if Kyle Isbell can play center field. We very much know that he can now. And that, to me, when you are singled out in that, kind of in the same way that we found out today that Michael Massey still appears to be the starter for the Royals and Adam Frazier's more of a utility guy, a depth piece, I think the Royals are going to move forward with Kyle Isbell. I think they feel like his bat's going to come around enough where his defense is already so unbelievably good. You hit 240 or 250 an OBP of like 310 or 315, you're talking about a 3 to 4 WAR player. I think that is in the cards if he becomes a league average bat. Even if he's a singles hitter, the walk rate increases, you're looking at a very, very respectable center fielder. Whereas Drew Waters, the bat does concern me. The swing and miss is something I want to eliminate a lot more in this line. There's going to be some swing and miss guys. Salvador Perez is going to be a swing and miss guy. I'm going to say that Nelson Velasquez is going to be a big swing and miss guy. Hunter Renfroe is going to be a big swing and miss guy. I don't want another outfielder with big swing and miss. Melendez can be big swing and miss. You don't want the entire outfield being big swing and miss. So that part of his game is alarming. And now the question becomes, well, what do you do? Is Drew Waters really valuable as a fourth outfielder? Because I've said this before in the podcast. I think Dairon Blanco is better for the Royals off the bat than Drew Waters is. Dairon Blanco's the second fastest guy on the team. He's good defensively, and he's got a more consistent bat than Drew Waters. Drew Waters maybe can be stashed away in AAA Omaha, and then if somebody's not performing well, hey, he's the guy. You can call him up. On the other hand, Nick Lofton kind of feels like that guy that starts in AAA, and then he's the first man called upon. Now, Drew Waters has value, defense for sure. And I almost wonder if the Royals would be shopping that around a little bit in spring, because we're going to see some trades in the spring. That happens, okay? Because, you see where some guys are fitting in. You see if they can really win that position battle. And then when you kind of get to that roster crunch of, Blanco plays really, really well in Surprise. He plays well in spring. And Kyle Isbell's playing well. And they want him to be in center. And they're both healthy. Well, they're not moving Melendez for Waters. They're not moving Renfroe for Waters. Where does Drew Waters go? I think that at that point, he's going to be traded. That would be my guess right now. Because I don't think it's doing him or the Royals any good for him to be stashed away in AAA. Maybe he's going to go in there to center field and battle it out with Isbell, and maybe he beats out Isbell. Then Isbell's the one that's getting traded. I just think, though, the Royals have their preference out there in center field, and I do believe that it's Kyle Isbell. What do you think the Royals should do with Drew Waters? Should they start him in center? Should they trade him? Or should they just move on from him, stash him away in AAA and just hope the best for a guy like Drew Waters? Let me know on the YouTube channel and let me know on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. Before we say goodbye, one last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. You have a great weekend, Kansas City. When we return on Monday, we're going to have 5 episodes a week for the next 10 months. Very excited about it, getting back into the swing of things. And tomorrow, I'm going to be out there at Royals Rally getting some interviews from about 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. So if I run into you, don't be afraid to say hi. I don't know if I'm going to be where the fans are for that aspect. I'll figure out everything tomorrow. But follow me on Twitter. I'm going to have a lot of coverage on that. Going to have some video, going to have some live tweeting stuff. So go check me out over there. But until Monday, you take it easy, Kansas City.